Good morning. My name is Shannon Kavanaugh. Today I'll be having my first podcast guest, who is Dr. Kaylin Switzer, who goes by Coach K. Coach K is a resilience coach. She has her PhD in forensic psychology, and I'm going to let her go ahead and take it over and explain exactly what she does, what she can do for current law enforcement, retired law enforcement, or anyone looking to be just a little bit more resilient in their life. So please take it away, Coach K. I'm so grateful for you being here today as my guest.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here as well. So resilience is kind of a misunderstood concept. A lot of people think that resilience is just bouncing back after something terrible happens. But in reality, resilience it's not just bouncing back, right? It's having the capacity to handle stress and handle adverse circumstances without breaking down. So when it comes to occupations like law enforcement, stress is really unavoidable in these high performance and high risk professions. And resilience can determine how well someone functions under that stress, but it can also determine how quickly they recover from adverse circumstances. So things like emotional regulation and clear thinking under pressure and physical capacity to handle the stress, and then also practicing healthy recovery habits. This is all a part of a resilience toolkit that can really be used to mitigate stress in high stress occupations. So as a resilience coach, I kind of just work with people to build those capacities in an intentional way. So I teach tools for stress management, for recovery, for decision making, and for self awareness. And the goal is really to strengthen people before problems escalate.
I love that. And the thing that we talked about backstage before was how, when we're in the law enforcement field, what are the things that we do, not just for law enforcement, for any stressful occupation? What do we turn to when the fire gets really cranked up? Because just by virtue of being in some of these systems, things are going to happen. And what are we turning to? I know as a retired law enforcement officer, it wasn't always the healthiest choice. There was drinks at the bar for a lot of us. I mean, that's not, I don't want to demonize that, because there was so much good that came of it as well. The camaraderie, the fellowship, the really unplugging after such horrific things that police officers, maybe ER nurses, other types of occupations carry with it, a lot of heaviness. So what are some of the things that you recommend that you actually do for yourself? I know that you're a CrossFit coach, so that's kind of where I'm going with this. Not that everyone needs to do CrossFit, but please speak to that outlet.
Yeah, for sure. So I drink the juice. I'm part of the CrossFit cult. I know that that's a huge ordeal in and of itself in this world, but any sort of exercise is good exercise. It doesn't have to be CrossFit. It doesn't even have to be just going and lifting weights at the gym. It can be, a league, like a rugby league or a softball league, or I know of some departments who do like baseball leagues or dodgeball leagues, like any sort of activity, any sort of exercise, because ultimately exercise isn't just physical training. It's one of the most effective nervous system regulation tools that we have. So when we exercise, we regulate our stress hormones, we regulate our anxiety levels, we regulate emotional regulation at large, and we improve sleep quality, which has all kinds of benefits in and of itself. So when officers specifically use physical outlets like CrossFit, like jujitsu, like running, like lifting, or participating in these sports leagues, that intense movement helps them discharge the stress that they're storing in their body from the job. And then they're less likely to take it home with them. And it's a part of the kind of decompression toolkit that we try to enforce and try to practice on a regular basis.
I can definitely speak to this, being a single mom in law enforcement, that it was so critical for me to find a place, not being able to work out after work, because that's more time away from my child. So I did find a CrossFit place that was only a mile away, and I made every attempt. Even my subordinates, when they worked for me, were like, you need to go work out, because they could feel I feel like they could feel my stress. And I do want to back up for one moment. Okay. We were introduced by the first sergeant that I ever had in law enforcement at Hudson County, Robert DeGenova, Bobby D. And you and he had connected. And I'll let you fill in your part of that. But my part was, he always encouraged us to work out. I mean, he talked the talk, walked the walk, and we were fortunate to have a gym at Hudson County. I mean, it was a mess, but it was weights to lift. And at the time, it was way back in the 90s. So we took Rip Fuel. And so if you didn't have, that was like a ton of caffeine. If you didn't have an outlet for the workout, you were just like shaking. And he's like, did you work out today? Because you need to. I mean, my bosses could tell if I didn't work out. My subordinates 20 years later could tell if I didn't work out. It was such an important outlet for me, especially being a woman and just knowing my own makeup, that two things. You're talking about working out and having that outlet. And the other part post-retirement for me was getting to know myself and what my newest interests are, because after you retire, you have to figure out who the F you are again. Like, you have to figure out what you like and don't like after being told what to do and how to do it for so many years. So I just wanted to add that from the very beginning of my career, I had bosses that he's still my mentor to this day, 25 years later. And he says that is the one non-negotiable for he's been in law enforcement. I don't want to misquote, but he's now the deputy chief of Stevens University. And so he's been in law enforcement forever. And if that's the one thing that he says that he turns to, I mean, I think this is a great topic for people. It could be, like you're saying, whatever it is for them.
Right. Yeah. And the other part of it too is when you're doing something like CrossFit or jiu-jitsu or any sort of activity that's requiring you to push your own limits, you do learn a lot about yourself, right? You learn a lot about where your breaking points are and what you can help with, what you can withstand. And it's also this kind of camaraderie aspect that is overlooked a lot of times. When people leave the occupation, say they retire from law enforcement, a lot of times one of the things that they miss the most is that sense of camaraderie, that kind of brotherhood that exists in this occupation. And you go somewhere like a CrossFit gym or a jiu-jitsu gym, and what you end up having is that same kind of community foundation that you can rely on and that you can lean on and that you can commiserate with and suffer through hard things with, just like you did in the field. So there's a lot of kind of benefits and cross-pollination there, especially for people who are coming out of the occupation.
Thank you for that. Another thing that we spoke about was that I found really, really interesting was I was introduced to the concept of compartmentalization. And we kind of talked about when you had a really tough case, you just kind of put it back in the Tupperware and dealt with it another day. And a lot of it, that was light, you could deal with at the time and just get through it. Maybe some, laughs with colleagues, but there's two in particular for me that I could not touch until 5 years after retirement that were so hard and painful. And so when we were speaking before, you had talked about a different spin on compartmentalization that I think is really, really important for you to share.
Yeah. So when compartmentalization first was brought up in the psychology world, it was brought up as a negative thing. We were essentially asking people to take whatever they experience, throw it in a box and toss it to the side and deal with it later, which a lot of mental health professionals really caution against. But in these high stress professions, things like compartmentalization can be used as decompression tools. It's not throw it in a box and forget about it indefinitely. It's set it aside so that you can open another box, which is maybe your home life, your family life, and you can dedicate your time and energy and attention to that in this moment. So it's less of compartmentalizing and blocking it out and forgetting about it, and more being very intentional about where you're directing your energy and what you're focusing on. And in law enforcement, this is part of decompression techniques that I teach people as a resilience coach. And a lot of it can include something simple like transition rituals. So when you're leaving work, if you've had a particularly awful day, you can take everything that you've experienced and you can put it in this mental box and set it aside. And you can listen to very specific music that takes you down off the edge a little bit, or maybe do a short workout or practice a breathing routine before you get home and before you enter that other box or that other realm of your life, which is your personal and your family, which is just equally as important, right, as your job and what the work you do. So it's a form of decompression rather than a just box it out and forget about it technique, which is what it was originally kind of thought to be, but it's really a little bit different than that. But the other part of that is if you're practicing compartmentalization, you do need to remember that those boxes are full of these experiences, and they do need to be opened and they need to be dealt with at some point. So it's also taking the time to make sure that you're being intentional about going back and opening up those boxes at some point, and coming to terms with what it was, whatever it was in that moment, and how it affected you, why it affected you, what you had control over, what you didn't, and what you could do moving forward. So it's just compartmentalization, but not an indefinite amount of time. Definitely just making sure you're not taking work home with you and you're not dragging everything that you're experiencing to everyone else in your life.
I love that. I feel like that would happen during my career. And I even feel that this is a transition time where whenever I'm doing a lot of work in my head, a lot of mental work. And if part of the studying yourself is I've studied astrology, so I understand my makeup and what's masculine, what's feminine, and what can bring me more balance, knowing these things about myself. And because I carry a lot of, I know I'm wearing my pink and all that, but I carry a lot of masculine energy that really served me well in law enforcement. But as I'm trying to shift more into other creative endeavors, it invites more of the feminine and less of that masculine. So that's part of what I've been trying to balance. And I notice what you're saying when I come home and I've been so in my head, how can I get more into what I'm identifying as more into my feminine? So like you're mentioning, getting into my body. Yesterday was a stressful day. So I went outside and the sun happened to be out. It was nice. I just laid down to decompress my back. So are there any other things like that you could recommend for the listener that are just, I loved that you touched on music, because that definitely changes my state, like other things that can change your state, because I find that really helps, is like just shifting into something else. Do you have any other practical, pragmatic recommendations other than what we've mentioned?
Yeah, there are a ton of exercises that people can practice when they're just trying to pull themselves out of a state, right? Like a state of being. Most of this comes down to the composure domain of resilience, which is how you physically respond to and manage your stress. And so what you'll see a lot of times with people who are demonstrating maybe burnout or symptoms of burnout, they'll maybe get a little defensive very quickly, or they'll lash out, or they'll have these kind of anger outbursts. And you see this a lot, again, not necessarily at work, but at home after the job is already, you're done for the day. And so some of the composure techniques that people can do include mindfulness, meditation, breathing exercises, and even something as simple as we were saying as a transition zone. It can be anything. I had an officer who used to sit in his car when he got home and listen to one song that would just take him out of work mode and put him into husband and dad mode. And he would get out of his vehicle and he would take his boots off. This was very specific. He took all of his work equipment off before he went into the house. And that was a very specific transition activity or exercise that he did and was very intentional about, that allowed him to close the chapter on work for the day and open the chapter to home life and really be intentional with his energy in that regard. So simple kind of transition rituals or
Yes.
simple breathing exercises. Those are the best. And they're so simple, like they're so simple and anybody can just do them, but you have to be intentional and mindful enough to take the time to do them.
Yeah, I think that that is the key point. As someone who's in my head a lot, it's like you can't just have the knowledge. You actually have to do it. You have to, and I think that that goes into another topic, which is choosing yourself, self-love, self-compassion. What do I need to fill my cup, even if it's for 30 seconds or a minute, so that I'm better for everybody else? Because that, I have to admit, post retirement, that's been one of my biggest motivations for making so many changes in my life. It has been motivated by having a son that I'm like, I'm not willing to let him suffer for my crap that I didn't take care of. So it's a major motivation for me. And I loved hearing about the officer who he wants to come in and choose himself first so he can give what his family needs, because that's, at the end of the day, most of us know that is the most important thing. When we get into law enforcement, we want to, a lot of us are full of that piss and vinegar, and the career is a career, but we all kind of get to this certain point. I saw it in my own career and when I taught, that we realize the importance of family, and that this job is going to be here tomorrow, and that drug dealer is going to be here, and the dead bodies are going to be out there. Like, we've got to balance ourselves out better and do a better job. And it's one of the reasons that I was really excited to begin our conversation, because I want to offer things that people probably don't think of that are helpful and that they don't have to spend money on, because I know there's a lot of cheap cops. We got to save our money for a coffee and donuts, right? That's the joke.
For sure, definitely. And I think it's also important to note that most people are not failing or burning out because they're weak. A lot of times people are struggling with whatever it is that they're experiencing on the job because modern stress accumulates a lot faster than people can actually recover from. Stress today is more chronic rather than occasional, and helping professions operate in constantly high alert and high risk environments, which only adds to that kind of chronic stress. And then when you start neglecting yourself, you start neglecting your recovery habits like prioritization of sleep, regular exercise, setting boundaries between work and home. Then you also have these kind of organizational cultures that reward overwork instead of resilience measures or personal like self-care measures. This is where stress can accumulate, and without recovery it will break someone down, and it will absolutely just diminish their ability to respond effectively and be present at home and just do what they need to do on the job.
Are you finding, I know when we spoke before, my experience was very different. Are you finding that that law enforcement is coming forward and being more aware of these gaps and how far behind we have been in some agencies? I don't want to speak for every agency because I know that some are doing more, some are doing less. Are you seeing a move with the world that we're more focused on law enforcement's mental health, first responders' mental health? Because I know for us, and I'm not, it's just a product of when I came through. I started in 1999. It was the old boys club, and I did well in that kind of a career, but it was like after we saw this, I'm going to mention this murder of a little boy by his mother. It was a really horrific scene, all taken everything in the totality, what the circumstances were. And the captain's like, you good? Everybody okay? They did. It was the first time that mental health services were actually offered to us. And I was kind of like, what? I was taken aback, but none of us took them up on it. And I wonder what would have happened if I did, or if we did, if we started. So can you speak to the fear in law enforcement of actually going for the help when it's offered even? I mean, a lot of times it's not, but when it is offered, can you talk about that, like with our egos and stuff like that?
Yeah, so one of the things that unfortunately is very realistic, it's a very common occurrence in law enforcement. There's this stigmatization around help seeking. And it's not necessarily even, there's no evidence necessarily that suggests that you will absolutely be ridiculed if you seek out help, right? But there's this kind of understanding that exists. It's this unspoken kind of like, if I go and seek help. Yeah, it's just, but we are starting to see a shift in the narrative around mental health when it comes to law enforcement. So seeking psychological support isn't seen as much of a weakness as it was in the past. But it's still not quite where it needs to be. And by that, I mean, there's a lot of departments who are still reacting. It's still very reactive. And this is where it all comes back to my kind of approach on this. And what I really wanted eventually, what I really would like to see in more departments is I would love to see more of a proactive approach to this stuff. So the biggest mistake that we make in mental health, especially in helping professions like law enforcement, is waiting until someone breaks before we give them tools. So right now, a lot of the departments, they're taking this reactive approach. An officer experiences a really traumatic murder, a really traumatic event, they struggle, and then they're referred to a mental health professional. And the problem is that by the time that happens, stress has often been accumulating for years. So that's like waiting for someone to have a heart attack before you talk to them about exercise and nutrition, right? So everything's so reactive. Everything is so after the fact. Wait until something happens and then send them to the shrink, right?
And unfortunately, it becomes like an anger. Sorry to interrupt, but when I've seen people breaking down, myself included, it becomes rage.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like I can't take this anymore. I'm not crying because I can't take it. It's too much. It becomes anger. It becomes something that's expressed in a way that others are not going to recognize as this guy's crying out for help or this woman. So I think we're missing it as I was a supervisor for many years, and I think that we're missing it. And that something else that I saw is that when we had one guy who did seek help and he became the subject of gossip. So they're driven to the brink by their colleagues who are their friends, and then they're made fun of for going to seek help. So I'm sorry, I just had to interject that because I have the pragmatism to your intellect, and I want to kind of because I know other departments can probably say the same thing. So what's your spin on that part of it?
Yeah, it is. It's really hard because a lot of times, unfortunately, it's not even unfortunate. It's actually a coping mechanism that we recommend for law enforcement as a profession. But humor or kind of making a comedic spin on something is very common in law enforcement as a means of mitigating the stress or kind of mitigating the impact that an event or experience can have on someone. And as a result, it's oftentimes when officers are going, they're seeking out mental health or mental health from within their agency, and they're getting kind of picked on. It may not necessarily be in a kind of demeaning way. That is one of the ways that people kind of mitigate their own stress. They kind of pick on each other, and that's part of that brotherhood. It's that unspoken subculture that exists in law enforcement that is part of it, but they don't realize the impacts it has in the long run. And when you have people in leadership positions who are not enforcing these resources and really saying, like, if you start to feel any of these symptoms of burnout, or you're starting to feel the impacts of what you're experiencing, you need to go and seek out help, and it will not be punished. It will not it won't have any sort of impact on your career progression or your current position. And I think that level of kind of initiative from the higher ups is one of the ways that we can start to shift the narrative.
Yeah, having the officer feel safe and protected by his supervisors, but I can attest I can attest for a lot of cops that don't feel that. I mean, you're lucky if you get some supervisors along the way that really do care about you. But I think cops are really good at reading that as well, or people in high stress. And we're not just talking about cops, but people in high stress situations. You kind of know if somebody's going to have your back or not, and that can lend to your decision-making process of, is this a safe time or place? I know that I chose to compartmentalize, and I sought help when I first entered crime scene, knowing, kind of having foresight, knowing, wow, I've just seen a lot of murders and I need to have better tools. It didn't work out because I was working too much. So every time I got called out, I'd have to cancel a counseling session. But at the end of my career, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's the way I did it. I had a big murder trial at the end, so I did seek counseling there and got some really good support. And then post-retirement is when I chose to, it's how this podcast came about, is that I had such a beautiful career that I want to have happy, warm, beautiful memories about, because I do have those memories, but they were being clouded by the things that I compartmentalized and did not deal with. And until I pulled that Tupperware out last year and looked at it, and I really wish I met you last year, maybe you could help me. So I thought it was important to share you with other people who may benefit without having to feel like, oh, I got to go for, I went for EMDR, I went for counseling, and I did a lot of my own things, but I think that what you're doing is amazing. And I just wanted to share you. And the other thing I really wanted to touch on that I really perked up when we spoke is you talked about your grandfather and compassion fatigue. So, I mean, if you have anything to add to what I just said, go for it. But that will be my next question for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think that compassion fatigue is a really interesting kind of concept. I always talk about, like, is it a myth or is it real? Like, what is compassion fatigue? When you're talking about working in helping professions, compassion is a part of that. It's showing compassion for other people when, especially in law enforcement, you're seeing them on their worst day. So it's something that really you should have and you should be demonstrating at all times. My grandfather, who is also a doctor of psychology in British Columbia, he talks about how compassion it doesn't necessarily run out. What people lose is their alignment with why they started caring in the first place. So basically, compassion fatigue happens when your purpose in life becomes unclear. You're disconnected from why you're doing the work that you're doing. Your organizational culture starts to erode the meaning that you've put into the work you're doing, and your stress can start to accumulate without recovery. But if you're practicing compassion, it's kind of this give and get interaction that you have with people. If I'm being compassionate to someone else, they're going to return that with their own compassion for my kindness or my generosity in that situation. And that gives me the same chemical boost in my brain that I gave them. And as a result, you should never really run out of compassion, because it's this continuously refilling supply. It should be, if you're practicing it correctly. So a lot of times when I hear people say, I'm suffering from compassion fatigue, I look at them like, you're not practicing it enough, and that's a hot take. I think that's actually it can be a little aggressive to say that. Like, I don't think you're doing it correctly if you're experiencing compassion fatigue, because if you really were, then you would be feeling compassion in return. And I think it goes back to how we're training these officers before they go into the field. Are we training them to be humans and to talk to humans on their worst day in a compassionate way to make the situation better? Not just de-escalate, but genuinely make that person feel a little bit better. And that level of compassion is always reciprocated, which means you should never just run out or never be fatigued from it. So it's an interesting concept. It's definitely a hot take. But I think if people stay connected to their purpose and their values, then compassion tends to remain intact.
We had talked about, on that same vein, we had talked about, you mentioned purpose and alignment. So that leads us into, this is a big topic, coming off of compassion fatigue. How do people best find their alignment? And this is all part of what this podcast was birthed from. So I want to first get your take.
Yeah, so resilience lives at the intersection of purpose, habits, and self-awareness. So those are my top 3 pillars when it comes to resilience. And when we talk about purpose, what we're actually talking about is your vision, your direction, your motivation, your meaning. It's what gets you up out of bed in the morning and makes you want to go to work or makes you want to do what you do. And a lot of times without that, people start to drift towards cynicism, burnout, disengagement, lack of compassion, all of these things, right? If you are not intrinsically motivated, so we refer to it in psychology, it's this intrinsic motivation, doing it because you genuinely want to do it and not because of some external or extrinsic factor like the paycheck, right? If you're doing what you're doing, if you're doing the work you do because you genuinely want to have an impact, you genuinely want to help people, then in theory, you should be able to continue doing that regardless of the extrinsic kind of motivating factors that may come with it. But it's tricky to stay aligned with your own vision. One of the easiest ways to identify your purpose in life is through Simon Sinek's golden circle. So understanding your why. It's why do you do what you do, and not just what do you do, right? Like you could be a cop, but why are you a cop, right? Like what was it that made you want to go into the profession? And if your answer is I genuinely want to help people, then that's your why. And you have to hold that and you have to carry that with you every single day. Every day you get up and you experience something horrible, you have to think, I'm doing this because I want to help. I want to help people. And when you continuously tell yourself that, it's that little bit of push, that little bit of self-motivation and self-efficacy that keeps you going and keeps you honest and keeps you on the right track.
So you were talking about your why, and I wanted to get to your why. So you have like I mentioned before, you have your PhD in forensic psychology. What brought you into this field? And I know that you specialize in first responders and law enforcement resiliency, but what brought you? What is your why? What gets you up in the morning and drives you?
So similar to law enforcement, many law enforcement professionals, I want to help people. I really do. But what it was in my life was I did an internship with a police department in Florida, and I was in a criminology program for my undergrad, and I just kind of had to do these ride-alongs. I was forced to go on all of these ride-alongs as part of the internship. And at first I was like, oh gosh, okay, whatever. Like this is just part of it. I got to go do it. But the more time I spent with these officers, and I did countless ride-alongs, the more I started to realize just how inaccurate this them versus us mentality was between the public and law enforcement officers. And I started to realize, again, that most of the things that we're doing to try to help law enforcement officers are very reactive in nature. And in the completion of that internship, I made it my mission to change that. How can I help? How can I go in on the front end of this career and give officers the tools and the resources they need to mitigate their own stress before they inevitably experience something traumatic on the job? What can we do up front? And it gets me out of bed every single day to get up and know that I can have an impact on someone's life, that I can teach them these tools, go through these techniques with them, show them that, this isn't a sign of weakness. This is actually how you avoid having to get sent to the shrink later, or having to, deal with the potential of suspension or losing your gun and badge or any of those other fears that a lot of these officers get when it comes to seeking help in their profession. So really just working to help people. It makes me happy. It gives me a really strong sense of purpose, to know that I can be of service to the people who serve us.
I think you've got a great population to start with. One of my friends who works with the FBI, he has turned to counseling before he even retired. And he said that particularly Gen X men are struggling. And I don't want to leave anybody behind. These were my brothers. These were my friends. They are the people who helped get me through this career. It is not, people just know that it's not an easy career. If you're a woman and you choose this, they may think you're a little crazy, but you as a woman, especially coming in when I did, you had to be bigger, better, faster, stronger, have more education than the guy sitting next to you, and truly want to be there for your it has to be purpose driven. If it wasn't purpose driven for me, if it wasn't something that I considered to be what my soul agreed to, I couldn't have gotten through it. And I certainly couldn't have gotten myself to do the 180 I have done since I retired, to make sure that my life, I'm not carrying around that heavy weight of the things that hurt me in this occupation, the lack of support, the betrayals, the discard by the people who were supposed to stand for justice. I never stopped standing for justice. So those were some tough things I had to come to terms with. And I have a way of wanting to do this healing work on my own. I do ask for help, but I know nobody's coming for me. I have to get myself through this. So I just appreciate the work that you're doing to try to head it off at the pass before you're 5 to 6 years into retirement going, I want to have happy memories about my career. I don't want it to be clouded, and the term that I'm going to use, and I want you to expound upon this, is alchemy and transmutation. Those are the two words I like to go to. Is like taking the hard things and the great things, all of it from that career, and just turning it into something that means something, that can help other people. So first, thank you for being a part of this, because this is my transmuting of the hard times and wanting to showcase the friendships, the humor, the resilience that we all possess. We just have to have the intention and find the people who are also driven by their heart and purpose, who want to help other people through some really tough stuff. So first of all, thank you, because this podcast is a thank you to the people out there helping. I almost want to cry. What is happening to me? Maybe I am my feminine in my heart, but so just please speak to that, the transmutation and the alchemization, and how to get to the other side.
For sure. Yeah. And I think one thing that's very important to note in all of this is that resilience is not just a personality trait. It's a set of skills that you can learn and you can train and you can complete and continue to improve on all the time. And it takes emotional regulation. It takes physical capacity. It takes your own awareness of stress and what it is, how you react to it, and purpose and meaning, and also supportive relationships. And oftentimes in law enforcement, officers stick to other officers as their support networks, but having outlets and having other people in your support networks that you can lean on and you can talk to, and you can go through your life with without feeling like you're holding things back or holding things in, but just being very transparent, not necessarily to the world at large, but with yourself. Like a lot of introspection, self-reflection regularly. Why did that make me feel the way it did? What did I learn from it? What could I do to respond better next time, right? Like these kind of moments of reflection, and not just, well, it is what it is. What are you going to do? And just brushing it off and pushing it under the rug and forgetting about it. But being intentional with like understanding you are human and you are going to experience very stressful things. And you are going to experience really wonderful things. And some days you're going to be nobody's favorite person. People are going to just shit on you all day long. And other days you're going to be the hero. You're going to save the day. And you have to take the good and the bad together. You have to feel it, let yourself feel it, understand the impact it has on you, and move forward with that understanding, with that gained knowledge and that gained experience, so you can respond to the next thing you experience better. And those are all things that I think we just don't spend enough time teaching officers, young officers, early on. And you get to the point in your career where a lot of Gen X officers are, where now they don't necessarily have the tools to mitigate it. And they're not sure if going and seeking help is the right call, because they don't want to lose their gun and badge. They don't want to lose the potential promotion, or whatever the case may be. They don't want to be seen as weak. They don't want to be picked on by their peers. But you should have been given the tools up front, and that's not your fault. And we can't do anything about what was done in the past, but we can do something about how you move forward. And it takes wanting to get better and wanting to be a better person, and not wanting to, or not allowing these experiences to taint your view of your career, your passion, or your purpose altogether. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done, but I think it's a beautiful thing when you see it happen the way it's happening for you.
There was a post that I saw recently that you put on LinkedIn, and I really want you to go into it, because it comes from what you were just talking about. What happens when there's learned helplessness? That whole, I had never heard it broken down the way that you broke it down. And I want you to go a little bit into that, like the alternative too, the positive, because with everything there's polarity. So you can either have learned helplessness, or you can, what else? What can you do that's on the positive end, instead of feeling that helplessness, like there's nowhere for me to go, nothing to do? And what happens in our bodies when we feel helpless and like a victim?
So over time, what you'll see is that when you have this sense of learned helplessness, you end up having this kind of overwhelming cognitive load. And with this sense of helplessness, this kind of woe is me, comes these feelings of cynicism, these feelings of negativity constantly. And our brains are wired to take repeated patterns and run with them. So if you're consistently in this state of helplessness, or woe is me, or I had no control, I have no control moving forward, everything that happens is a part of luck, and I don't really have control over what comes next. If you start feeling these negative thoughts, or start thinking them regularly, your brain will take it and run with it, and just continuously give you this negative cognitive load. And it's a mental effort that can be used against you, and it will inevitably can turn into something like burnout. But it's why people start to feel irritable or foggy or unmotivated. And it's unfortunate, because a lot of times it comes down to simply shifting your perspective or looking at it from another angle. But when we're teaching somebody that, the last thing we want to do is be like, obviously you have learned helplessness, like you're the problem here, right? Like nobody wants to hear that. Yeah. But you do want to explain some of the neuroscience behind it. This is what happens when you continuously have these same thinking patterns over and over and over again. If you don't shift your perspective, if you don't shift your mindset, your brain is going to continuously push these negative viewpoints on you, whether you want it to or not. It's just going to become habitual in your mind. And so we focus a lot on, how can I shift my perspective? How can I see what I can control? What do I have control over? And what can I do next? And those are the kind of things, when we're combating that learned helplessness, that we try to focus on in resilience training.
I love that. It's looking at things from a different perspective. And I think the things that you were speaking about before, like having your CrossFit, having your hobbies, having your things that actually do make you feel good about yourself outside of the job, that are like, I'm loving myself, I'm giving back. I know dudes are not walking to a CrossFit gym like, I love myself, but that is the message that you are sending yourself, is that I care enough to take the time out of my day to let this steam out of me. I know walking into the CrossFit gym as a single mom at noon, it was a bunch of other cops. It was like 5 other cops, and just trying to get it in and keep their mental health. Like we all knew while we were there. And I will say, we never, ever walked out of that gym. And believe me, I was not trying to be in some competition. I was a new single mom, just trying not to be crazy. You know, it was, I knew it was my mental health. If it was just for vanity, I would have given that stuff up years ago. This was, I knew, such an important part. And I think a lot of people know now in this day and age that if you're in your 40s and 50s and you're still doing this, it is not for vanity. It's, you know, we're trying to keep our heads straight. So what got you into teaching CrossFit, and where did this all click for you, that this is not separate silos? Because I think that's a further part of the conversation, that this isn't like, I go do this, I go do this. No, these things are helping us to get through stressful things by having those outlets, right?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's, if we started to think about prioritizing mental health as a form of professionalism in these occupations. I think we would see a lot of different kind of opinions on this, but I got into CrossFit because I needed it. I had my own mental demons that I was battling, and we all do. We've all been through it. We all have experienced different things, but I needed that physical outlet. Like you were saying, I needed to sweat it out. I needed to push myself to my limits, and I wanted to feel exhausted. I wanted to be so exhausted afterwards that I didn't have the energy to continue stressing over whatever it was that I was stressing over, or continue dwelling in my mind over whatever it was that I was dwelling on at the time. And so I used CrossFit as an outlet. And I met people in that community who were doing the same thing, who were there for the same reasons. And you start to build this camaraderie with people again that really shifts how you view. It's not just exercise. It's not, yes, it's great for you. It's really, really good for your health. But when you're trying to be the best version of yourself, that you can go to the gym all day long, but you need that kind of experience. You need that intensity. You need that community. You need those elements to really feel the impacts on a mental level and on a physical level. And I think it's, resilience coaching, physical fitness, any of that, it reframes this kind of stigma around mental health as a performance optimizer. Think about this as a professional take. If I want to be better, if I want to do better, if I want to have these impacts, right, I need to optimize my performance in my personal life and in my professional life. And that's what this ultimately comes down to. Find your outlets. Use CrossFit if that works for you. Use jiu-jitsu. Use a sport, rugby or baseball or soccer or anything like that. But
Yoga.
find a community. Yeah, yoga, anything. But you find your thing and use it. Use it and feel the impacts. But that goes back to the awareness part of it, where it's you can go and you can experience it, but think about afterwards how you feel. Like, I felt better. And I had to recognize that I felt better, to notice that that was the cause, right? So awareness, it's so incredibly important. And people just don't take the time to really sit with themselves to understand that.
So I think I think one of the last questions I have for you before we start giving like where people can find you and how they can work with you is what I hear a lot of women right now in my life, and it's no coincidence because we're all connected. A lot of women are in transition, and men too, but the women I've talked to lately, it's been about transition time when things are changing, when you're not quite your old self. I'm not a cop anymore, but I'm doing other things. What do you say to these people who are in retirement or about to retire and they're so scared? My colleagues are terrified. Like, what am I going to do after? A lot of them are saying, I just want to push carts at Walmart and like collect the carts. And then I hear more of them who do that for 6 months, want the mental break. And then it's like, well, we touched on how to align and how to find your purpose before, but what do we say to people who are feeling stuck or who are in a transition and things are not going maybe as quickly as they would like? What things can they do in those kind of instances, or is it similar?
It's definitely similar, but I would say in those instances, the very first thing I would recommend is take a break. Take that break. It can be 1 month, it can be 6 months, it could be a year, but take a break from what you had considered to be a normal routine and what you experienced normally or regularly that the average person in the average world probably doesn't experience on a regular basis, right? Take that break and just do what you want to do for a little while, right? Maybe that's going and sitting on a beach with a cold drink in your hand, or maybe that's yoga, or maybe that's CrossFit, or maybe it's going and joining the PTA and being a part of all the activities that your kids have to do. But do what you want to do and be present in what you want and what you love and what you appreciate and enjoy doing. And then shift your focus back to what you're aligned with. Shift it back to your vision. What do you want to do? What are you good at? What do you want to do? How do you want to help people? And how can you make money off of it if you want to, right? Like, of course, we have to consider the practical matter of that. Just because you're retired doesn't necessarily mean you have to be without work for the rest of your life. But shifting back to what you're aligned with, what is it that you want to do and how can it be impactful? If, especially coming out of a helping profession, that you went into that profession wanting to help people. You think you're going to come out of it and just be like, I'm good, I helped people, I'm done. Like, that's a part of who you are. It's ingrained in who you are. So you really need to consider what other ways, how else can you help people? Because it doesn't just mean you have to go be an EMT or be a police officer or be an ER nurse. There's so many other ways you can help people, and help people in your profession. I mean, I encourage people to consider ways that they can go back and help, like what you're doing. What other ways can you go back and help the people who are in the position you were in before? And find your love for helping people again. And I think it goes back to self-reflection, introspection, taking time to sit with yourself. And that happens during that break. So take a break, take a deep breath, and figure out what's going on in your own mind. And once that's sorted, everything else just kind of falls into place.
Coach K, it's humbling, but I'm so grateful for it. You just pointed, and I'm going to be vulnerable for a moment. You just pointed out what I did wrong, and I knew I'm not going to, I did it wrong. We all have our own journey and our own path, and I chose it for whatever my reasons were, but I did not give myself that break. And I went right back into law enforcement as a civilian. And that was a huge mistake for my mental health. And I knew going into it, being back on call, doing crime scene, doing all those things, but I was like, well, I need money and I can do this. I did this for my whole career. I can do this. I can do it. And I think that was the wrong way for me to look at. It's not, can I do it? I've retired. And you said it, what do you want to do? What really lights you up? I was looking at it like, I want to get a pool. I want to put some landscaping around my house. I got to figure out how to do this. So it sometimes can be hard to really, again, I go back to that self-love of loving yourself enough to choose what is good for your mental health. And I did not do that. And I had to learn the hard way. I really did. And I wish I could say it was a one and done. No, then I go get a consulting job that I thought, well, I can read other people's homicide reports and then find what they could have done better and, kind of look at it that way. And it was a great job. Now I worked for great people, but it was my soul going, this chapter needs to be closed. And it kept telling me that. And I wasn't ignoring it. I was hearing it, but I was going, but what? And so that's been the journey. So thank you for that for retirees, because I have a lot of friends who have retired and we're just trying to figure it out and align with the purpose. And that is a lot easier said than done.
For sure. No, it definitely is. But I think help exists with that. If you really just lost, help exists for that kind of stuff. So
that leads us right into, for people that want to work with you, where can they find you? I see your company is right behind you. So why don't you shout out what you do and where you are? Yeah. Where we can find you?
Yeah. So Cyrus, I know it looks weird. It's like it's whatever. It looks like pyre. I've heard Pyrus, whatever. But it's Cyrus. It's the psychology behind resilience. But cyruscoaching.com is the easiest way to see what it is that I do. It's the easiest way to contact me. And I write a newsletter every month, and I promise not to spam you because I don't have time to spam you. But I write a newsletter every month. That's just the latest scientific findings broken down into layman's terms on all things health and wellness and little practical tools that you could be using in your day-to-day life. So those are really simple ways. I do build custom resilience programs, everything from functional fitness, nutrition, and proactive mental health strategies. So it's all done through an app. And I just create the program based on the person's goals, and they work through journaling prompts or breathing exercises, mindfulness exercises, and they can schedule calls with me and just talk it out. Maybe they just want to get something off their chest. I'm not a therapist, but I definitely help people proactively engage what it is that's going on in their mind, and figure their life out, figure the direction they want to go in next. So that's all kind of in a nutshell what I do. But I also coach CrossFit, and that's, you can also come to any one of my classes if you're ever around Belgium.
And your presence is on, I know, LinkedIn, TikTok. Where else are you posting your videos? What other platforms are you utilizing where we can see what you have?
Instagram's definitely the top one. I have Instagram. I think it's at drk_slay. 16, I think is the handle, but Instagram is a good place to find content. I take a lot of my blog posts from the website and I turn them into social media content that goes out on Instagram and on the Cyrus Facebook page. So those two places get all the same content, but depending on which platform you're on, you could access it. TikTok, I've actually been doing a lot more videos on generational differences. My research looked at generational differences in law enforcement officers when it came to resilience and turnover intentions. And so I've been taking my own research and breaking it down into little videos and talking about that on TikTok. But a lot of times I'll take those videos and post them over on Instagram as well. So those are definitely the best places to see the work I'm doing. I can be reached on any of them. They all go directly to my phone. So yeah, and I encourage people to reach out. Even if you don't want to work necessarily one-on-one, if you just want to ask questions or talk or figure it all out, I'm really open to discussion with everybody.
Yes, we'll put all of your handles in the show notes and make sure people can reach you. And I think that the generational part of law enforcement is going to be really interesting. That I think we could probably spend a whole other show on the different generations being brought up as a Gen X, being brought up by boomers, and then having millennials come on the scene who are like a couple of like, oh, I don't drive to New York City. And I'm like, wait a minute. Better boundaries, but also very like, what do you mean you don't do something that you have a badge and a gun and so I think that would be an amazing conversation that we can come back to and have you back on the show if you'd like that.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely count me in.
So is there any last things you want to leave the audience with, the listeners with today?
No, other than just if you are actively in law enforcement or if you've been in law enforcement in the past, thank you for your service. Continue doing the work you're doing, and there are people out there who care and who genuinely want to help.
I got to leave it right like that. Thank you so much. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful what you're doing. I really respect it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.